Hello. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about contrast. I think I touched on this in the last video I did, but I think that a lot of what people call like suffering, it actually is contrast, because what what you feel is labeled as pain, but then it can be labeled as joy or pleasure, and it's depending on like how your senses are engaging with it. So whenever you take an opportunity to transfer something negative into positive, that's you affecting your senses. So each human being has that ability. Affect their senses, affect their perception. So you can take any circumstance and believe it to be something, and then it is that, right? You want to subscribe to that, create your own reality, which I think we do. But even if we don't, you still can affect your perception of things. So whenever there's an opportunity to affect your perception, I see that now as building frame. Affect my perception of this current state of affairs, building my frame, building my lens of reality. And I think that's what we're all doing. And we're each kind of choosing what kind of reality we want to build. And then we proceed to do that by advancing upon our perceptions of what takes place. And then you also choose what you expose yourself to, thus having more effect on your experience and the contrast, because you can start to gauge how you're going to react to things. And then you put yourself in those circumstances and you start to get a better feeling of how you're going to react, how you can apply pressure to perceive things in certain ways. And you can then create change. So a human being can change. And often that isn't stressed enough. It's sort of like alluded to, like you can make some alterations in your life. But the truth is that the human being has the ability to radically transform themselves. You use ideas as tools. You apply them to your state of affairs. And, you know, over time, it changes your circumstances. It changes your belief systems. So, small minds talk about people. Average minds talk about situations. And great minds talk about ideas. So I'm always talking about ideas because I'm applying this theory because I want my mind to be great. Because if my mind is great, then my thoughts are great, my actions are great, my fucking life is great. And it should be. So I pay attention to great people too. And I'm always on the search for that. So whenever I come across someone that has a strong frame, that's a thing of value because they've built it. And I'm consider myself like a worker. Like I'm someone who builds. And what I build is an idea. What I build is a frame. It's something real. someone who works in a factory and builds like action figures, I suppose they are physically building something, but it's a thing. I want to build an idea, man. I'm building ideas, and I want to give those ideas out as tools.
No, it's okay.
And the more you think something, the more it becomes. So if you want to become something, you have to think about it. And then you have to feel it. So you're connected between thoughts and feelings. So if you can break down the resistance to thoughts, what you're going to feel is like some pain in reaction to that. So I have a barrier towards making a lot of financial gain because I've not really had, tons of financial success so far, and it's because I have blocks to that. And so I'm breaking down those blocks. So I'm allowing myself to think in terms of I can be financially successful. That it's okay for me to do that. It's possible. It's even necessary. So when I break down that resistance, what I feel is what could be considered pain, because there's such limiting beliefs on there. So I'm trying to slice those things up and move into them and be like, oh wait, I can become financially successful. That is possible. And so the more I advance upon that, the more I'm then thinking to myself, okay, that's true. So whenever I run into people and they have severely limiting beliefs, it's like an illness, it's like a plague. It's like a disease that's striking them down. It's this kind of poison that drips them. This constant, you can't do that, I can't do that, I'm not allowed. And wears on you, man. It wears on you, it affects you, and it's very real. Thoughts are things. Like, they're very real. And they're very valuable, but they can also be dangerous. So you have to guard your own mind. You have to guard your own frame against these things. It's like a vigilance, man. It's like to be constantly vigilant. Jarrett Grossman from Muscle Prodigy, he used to talk about the crystal staircase. Like, don't be afraid to mess up the crystal staircase of your life. It's not going to be perfect. Your life is not going to be perfect. So he says, you're going to have to just get your mind exposed to the idea that the crystal staircase is going to be trampled by big, heavy boots with spikes and mud all over them. And you're going to trample all around on that crystal staircase until it's all dirty and scraped up and smashed around, because it's a messy game. Life is incredibly messy. Like, I'm telling you what, from what I've seen, and not just really my experience, but what I've witnessed in other people's experiences, because I learned from a lot of other people. And that's how I I'm gaining most of my knowledge is through other people's success, other people's failures. And that's what you have to do. That really is what you have to do. So there's no easy answer, and there's no quick route. There's no smooth fucking transition from being where you are to being where you want to be. It's like this constant process. Sometimes you have to like really allow who you are now to be a memory, and that the person that you were doesn't have to be the person that you're becoming. I listened to Joe Rogan once talk about where you don't have to be that person who one time you were drunk and you threw up all over the floor. That was one time. That was one thing. That's not who you are now. You can change. I remember in Rocky, Sylvester Stallone was giving that big speech in front of the Russians. And he was like, if I can change, you can change, maybe we can all change. It's like you can take motivation, you can take inspiration from like anywhere in life. And it's cool. And Alan Watts talked about where when you can take all of life and see it in a crumpled up styrofoam cup, maybe it was a paper cup, crumpled up on the ground, you can start to see that it represents everything. The whole world is in that. The crumple, the way that the light shines off of it. I'm a big believer in self-development because I think that it's the way. It's the route. It's the path for us. Spiritual enlightenment. Developing more peace from within. I think it's awesome. And the more people that want to become exposed to this and grow into these ideas, I think the world's only going to become a better place. And there's tons of like issues in the world that you can look towards. Like if you want to, and you can find all manner of environmental disasters and fucking conspiracy theories and all of it. But the bottom line is there's so many individuals who are doing awesome things and who are so dedicated to becoming like peaceful individuals. And always remember that there's the potential for each person to have a personal awakening through meditation, through psychedelic plant medicine, through all these different ways. It's still available to each person. Any human being right now can go within themselves and find joy, and transform their way of thinking. So it's like that gives me hope, and the internet, because now what I'm speaking about now is almost a transformative medicine in its own. I'm exposing people to a transformative experience just through my lens, through my perception of life, through the reality that I'm currently exposed to. I'm then sharing that with everyone who watches this video, and they can take a glimpse of my experience. So maybe you don't have to do everything that I've done. You might not have to spend 1,000 hours meditating, psychedelic medicine, reading hundreds of books, going through like the heartache that I have in order to grow to this point. You can just take my frame, look through it, and be like, okay, cool, Luke did that, and it seems like this is the outcome he had. Give it a try. Like you don't have to take everything I say as the law, but what you can do is pay attention to what I say and try to develop see if you can develop a trust and see if I keep my own logic. Do I just break logic at times and then be like, and all of a sudden I turned into dust and blew away? Or am I constantly keeping with a form of reality? I may talk about subjects